Hello and welcome. You found the Social Work Podcast. My name's Jonathan Singer, and I'll be your host as we explore all things social work. Today's podcast is the last in a series on phone supervision. In today's interview, I speak with Jody Bechtold about her experience receiving phone supervision as part of her process of becoming a nationally certified gambling counselor. We talked about the process she went through to find phone supervision, some of the pros and cons, and likes and dislikes of phone supervision. Jody contrasted phone supervision with face-to-face supervision and talked about phone supervision etiquette. Now, Jody's phone supervision was very structured and targeted. Still, her description of the experience of phone supervision and the apparent benefits of phone supervision to provide a focused and convenient forum for developing advanced clinical skills was nearly identical to the description provided by Simon and Melissa, our previous interviewees, despite the fact that Simon and Melissa are the providers and work almost exclusively with clinicians who are not working towards advanced clinical license. The most significant difference between their descriptions was that Jody advocated for a very structured format with required pre-session reading, whereas Simon and Melissa described a more process-oriented group, one that's probably more appropriate for the types of clinicians with whom they work. And now, on to the interview with Jody Bechtold about receiving phone supervision. So Jody, you do phone supervision. Can you tell us about your current situation?
Sure. I receive supervision for my national certification for gambling. I learned about it by going to one of my gambling trainings, and the trainer announced that there is a group of individuals that share phone consultation out of Ohio, and it's the last Saturday of every month. When we call in, we pay, and we get supervision. So I started doing that, and then ultimately what turned out was it was the same supervisor that ran every phone session, and only did they have substitutes fill in, because 12 months out of the year something's going to happen, especially with holidays and things. So I have a supervisor right out of Ohio for all of my supervision. I didn't pick her. It just kind of was very convenient given that there's no supervisors in the state of Pennsylvania. Ohio's right next to us, and it was very inexpensive given the time that I received and what she did in terms of paperwork for me when I continued on with my certification. I also got dialed in with several other people, so I would get to learn what's going on in Ohio. So that a lot of the other participants were from Ohio. And word got around in Western Pennsylvania, and at one point, several of us from Pennsylvania were also in on the phone call. It is somewhat structured in that it's 2 hours long, and part of the supervision is that you cover core competency areas and demonstrate to the supervisor that you're getting experience in each of those areas. Yet it's somewhat free-flowing because you can only talk about the reality of the case that you have. You can't fabricate it to cover the core competency if it's not really happening. So I've used the supervision to talk about my current cases, and if there was an area that I wasn't able to work on with a client, I would then use supervision to expand on and use it as an educational opportunity to learn more about it.
So the supervision that you have over the phone is a group supervision.
It's group supervision, but you don't know who all is going to call in every month. So you can get different participants every single month, but the same supervisor.
So what's that like, having different participants every month as opposed to the same group?
I think there's pros and cons. I like the fact that you get to hear from other people, so you get almost this very large group of individuals to understand how they're approaching the same treatment population. The cons are you don't really get to feel that closeness or that they're a colleague. It feels very distant because you might have only listened to them once.
And do you think that that's different, being that it's over the phone, than if it was face-to-face where people were coming in and out of the group?
I think with face-to-face it would be much more structured, and there would be a lot more organization and pre-planning that would be required in order to recruit enough individuals, have them come to the same location, and attend on a regular basis.
So some of the barriers to having face-to-face would be transportation, location, things like that. So
Absolutely.
So it'd have to be much more structured and much more organized.
Organized up front to, or even a marketing perspective, to attract enough individuals to make it cost effective for everyone involved to come face to face, to travel, to pay for this service.
What is it that you like and dislike about phone supervision?
Well, I definitely like that I can be at home. I like the fact that it's also on Saturday, because then I can really plan around that. It's very different than if you're trying to plan phone supervision during the week in an agency setting. Something always comes up, you could get interrupted, that type of thing. Whereas Saturday, everybody that's calling in doesn't have any other interruptions going on. So I really like that. What is difficult is to have never met my supervisor. I don't even know what she looks like. So that I kind of miss that connection that I'm used to when you get face-to-face supervision.
Do you think it would be easier if you had people's pictures, even that you could look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great. Almost if you had like a website of who are the supervisors that you might receive on the phone call type of thing, and have a face, a little bio. Absolutely.
That's interesting. So those are some of the likes and dislikes. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of phone supervision?
For the type of supervision that I'm receiving, I feel that it's very cost effective for my time, that it's on Saturdays, that it's over the phone. It's an 800 number. It's not a long distance call. It's organized through the phone system so that there's no interruptions. People don't have call waiting, beeping in and things like that. So I like that. And everybody's on the phone. So you don't have that speaker effect, and those are very cost-effective setups when you have a passcode and you dial an 800 number. So I like that. There's no travel required. I'm in my own environment. I'm comfortable. I can have all my paperwork spread out as much as I want. I'm not invading anybody else's space. So I like that. Disadvantages. It's actually really difficult to hold the phone and write your case notes or the consults as you're receiving feedback and suggestions. Holding the phone for 2 hours is the type of supervision I get, is 2 hours at a time. It's hard to hold the phone that long.
So that would be one of those times where investing in one of those headsets would be something that somebody who might be thinking about going into phone supervision might think about investing in, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you don't know if you have a headset, you have to pay for a pretty expensive one to get a good enough quality. And so you don't know if it sounds good to you, but no one on the other end can hear you. So there's a lot of trial and error with a headset that you don't actually get that time, because when you call in, everybody's on. That would be one of the other disadvantages. My supervision's 2 hours long, and that's a long time, actually.
To be on the phone.
Right.
It's a long time to do anything consistently.
Right.
Except maybe watch a movie.
So the only other thing that I think would help is, some of the phone supervision etiquette. And if you're going to have phone supervision for 2 hours, then after an hour, everybody should put the phone down and be able to use the facilities, take a break for a minute, and then come back. So I think that there's some things to follow to do really effective phone supervision and have some phone etiquette.
Speaking of phone etiquette, what are some of the things that you've found that have been good ways to engage with folks on the phone, and what would have been some ways that either that you've done or that other people have done that you find are really difficult to manage or deal with over the phone?
Well, we're talking group phone supervision, and so I would say to anyone to use the same principles you would use if you were running a group. And when you first start out the supervision, the leader kind of sets the rules and explains not only how to do mute on the phone, but, not to have any other conversations going on outside of the supervision. Everybody has a list of what they would like to accomplish, and given the number of people that might call in, how realistic is everybody going to, is it for everyone to get what they need accomplished? I would always call in and say, here are the things I'd like to discuss. I'm very aware that there's 4 other people on the phone. I'm not sure what they need to discuss. If we only get to items 1 and 2, that would be great. If we, get to items 3, 4, and 5, that would be wonderful. I think the person that leads the supervision really does need to kind of set the stage and at the beginning of the supervision for what's expected. And I've had a supervisor run it as a substitute that just kind of said, okay, what else? all right, anything else? And I've had a supervisor that did a great job of saying, well, if you don't have anything else to talk about, I'm going to present you with the case, and I want to hear what you have to do. So there's an element of preparedness that I think is part of the etiquette. Everyone that comes to the supervision does need to be prepared.
It sounds like perhaps because everybody who's calling in is going for their license, they have very specific learning needs and they have very specific clinical consultation kinds of things, and that having the more directive supervision from the supervisor is actually really beneficial in this group, as opposed to calling in and being like, hey guys, what's going on this week?
Absolutely. I think also because of the way the supervision I participate in is set up, it is open to anyone that's pursuing their certification. So there are core competencies you need to cover.
How do you maximize your benefit from phone supervision?
I have a list of things I need to cover. There are some things I would like to cover. There's others that I must cover. And so I'm very prepared for that. I'm aware of how many other people are on the phone. I don't necessarily try and get all of the things I need covered when I get to speak, because sometimes when another person presents their case, I actually learn from them presenting their case the thing that I had on my list to cover as well. And so you can actually, if you're really listening to everyone, you can benefit from what they have to say as part of illustrating your own core competency.
And what you just said about everybody listening makes me think that just as with a face-to-face group, you can have people that space out. I would imagine that it would be even easier over the phone for people to space out because there's no visual cue. The supervisor can't be like, Jody, are you with us? Is there something going on? Because it's just silence. Can you talk a little bit about the auditory stuff that happens in a phone supervision, maybe little things that you've picked up on?
It's interesting you say it that way because I feel that you spend more emphasis listening because it's phone supervision than you would if it was face-to-face. And so you're using your listening skills actually even more and relying on them. Somebody could get distracted. They could, if they don't have those visual cues. Yet at the same time, you don't get distracted because no one else is in the room grabbing your attention. So I think it goes both ways. You really have to know your personality style. And like with everything, we really need to practice utilizing our five senses in different ways. And this one definitely relies on the hearing and listening piece of it.
So you can really use all those active listening skills that that you have as a clinician to say, oh, that's interesting. So what I hear you saying is...
Exactly. Because all you hear is their voice. You don't see their facial expressions when they're presenting their case. You're not sitting across from them, next to them. You're not moving chairs. Any of those things aren't distracting you. All you have is holding the phone and listening.
If you could choose between face-to-face and phone supervision, say there was a supervisor in Pennsylvania, hypothetically, for your gambling certification, would you still choose phone supervision or would you switch to face-to-face?
I would actually do more of a combination because like we talked about, you get something different when you are relying on your listening skills. You get something different when it's face-to-face and there's a human connection. I would actually, if I was to do supervision myself, I would do a combination of phone, face-to-face, and email. And I would do email because then things are in writing and you can always refer back to them. You get it exactly the way that the supervisor explained it because it's in email. And then you can print it, and it's part of your files. Sometimes when you're listening or when you're face-to-face, you are slightly distracted because you're writing at the same time. Whereas email, you get to present something when it's convenient for you and you're very focused. They get to respond when it's convenient for them and they're very focused. And so I like the email as the third option. So I would do all three. That's really interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about phone supervision, maybe something that we haven't touched on? If you're going to do phone supervision, you need to schedule it at a time where the majority of the people will not be distracted. And so the evening or the weekend supervision actually makes a lot of sense. I would make sure that you set some of the rules the parameters for being on the phone. What is some of the phone etiquette? Most of us have the email etiquette by now, but when we think of email, when it first came out, there was a lot written about email etiquette. I think it would be even helpful for people who decide to be involved in phone supervision that there's like some pre-reading material that sets the stage so that everyone has that heightened professionalism when they participate in phone supervision.
I think that's a really great and practical tip to end our interview on, Jody. So thanks so much for coming out here and talking with us about phone supervision and specifically your experience as a recipient of phone supervision or a phone supervisee.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Jonathan Singer, and thanks for being with me today for another episode of the Social Work Podcast. If you missed an episode or have suggestions for future episodes, please visit socialworkpodcast.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit our online store at cafepress.com/swpodcast. To all the social workers out there, keep up the good work. We'll see you next time at the Social Work Podcast.